Well, good afternoon, friends, here from the Temple of Silence, I guess. With me recording these programs, it's not always so silent, but we're talking about the deeper subjective atmosphere, which we work on sustaining in this little temple, which under advisement, Tuya has conceived, and which I think stands as a little jewel between Sweden and Russia, kind of a bridging area between the preparatory school of Sweden and the advanced school of Russia. Well, I usually, let's just make sure I'm strong enough here. Yeah. Try to make a little segue. We've finished program 12. Now, remember, I have written on Makara commentaries which are not video commentaries. They came early and I think deserve a close study when you have the time or make the time. I just want to make a little segue here from program 12. The potent rhythm which animates the inner brotherhood, animates, notice the soul word, which animates the inner brotherhood of the Lodge of Masters, will make itself felt everywhere on earth. May I say, this is a prognostication for the Aquarian age. Everywhere on earth, and the Tibetan goes on, these groups, if successful, and may I say, nobody knows, not even the master, whether at this time they will be successful, but we all live in hope. If successful, may be regarded as the first step towards the emergence into manifestation of the Great White Lodge. So may I say, have we had the sense that in working in such groups, we are actually involved in precipitating the externalization of the hierarchy. We all have our little part to play, don't we? And it is with the reappearance of the Christ, one of the main things, if not the main thing, which is happening on our planet at this time. He goes on, but remember this, the keynote of the Lodge is not attainment or degree. You know, may I say that could lead to ambition. And if we students are always focused on our own attainment or the degree of initiation we are achieving, our consciousness is not quite in the right place. Rather, says the Tibetan, this keynote, it is stable relationship, unity of thought plus diversity of method, of effort and function. Actually, I have a song I should play for you sometime. It's called, from the Aquarian solar fire ritual, it's called Unity in Diversity. I rather like it. You know, some songs I create I like more than others. I like this one. So repeating what the Tibetan has said, the keynote, right? It is stable relationship, ponder these words, unity of thought. Well, excuse me, I jumped. No, I didn't. Unity of thought plus diversity of method, of effort, and of function. That's so important. That diversity is encouraged. It certainly does not mean that every member of the lodge has to walk in lockstep or locked step. There's room for creativity through this diversity, but it is the unity of thought which holds the group together. And this is one of my favorites, and its quality is friendship in its purest sense. And may I say, what would a pure friendship be? Wishing only the welfare of one's friend and not in any way taking advantage of the friendship. Thinking about something I or you or the friend can get from the other. It is a giving quality. And then let me say, you know, when you think about your acquaintances and your co-workers and so forth, who among them is really your friend and you the friend to that individual in the sense that is here being put forward? And its quality is friendship in its purest sense. Going on with the Tibetan, the Brotherhood is a community of souls who are swept by the desire to serve, urged by a spontaneous impulse to love, illumined by one pure light, devotedly fused, and may I add, note the word devotedly, it's applying to the Brotherhood also. Devotedly fused and blended into groups of serving minds, capital M, and energized by one life. So may I say, when I say may I say, I'm introducing the fact that this is my comment and not the Tibetan's text. This is an excellent definition of what the Brotherhood is. Every aspect of this definition can be pondered. Community, come one together, and note of souls, not of personalities, no, and who are swept by this powerful stream which carries with it a soul desire, the desire to serve, urged by a spontaneous impulse to love. Now think about that. May I say, we are so far from the love of the Christ. But every once in a while, a little intimation comes of something of the nature of that love, such a love that he retakes the first initiation with every candidate for whom he is the initiator of the first initiation. And it's not just a worked up impulse. Is there such a thing? It's an impulse, and it's spontaneous. It arises in the heart and mind spontaneously because the work has been done to clear the way for this spontaneous demonstration or impulse leading to a demonstration of love. Illumined by one pure light, the Brotherhood sees together in the pure light of a still greater light, and going on devotedly fused and blended into groups of serving minds. The focus is in the mind, held steady in the light of the soul or beyond, and it's not having anything to do with the astral body or with personality tradition, as DK sometimes calls it, or personality preference, and energized by one life. So the Brotherhood senses the monad lying on a head, the true source of life, of which every lower demonstration is really an instance. It's a reduction, but it's still the monad behind it all, pure being. So DK goes on, its members are organized to further the plan, which they consciously contact. May I add, from the highest levels of hierarchy and from the three great lords, which they consciously contact and with which they deliberately cooperate. And that means with deliberation, with decision, with will. We are not full members of the Brotherhood yet, but we are on our way, and we will behave and function in the manner that DK is here describing. I will say it should be an inspiration to all of us that the possibility of such giving lies ahead of us all. The joy is in the giving, and as Master Moria says, it is a joy to do the Master's work. Do we find it to be so? I would say more and more we will find it to be so once we can be really sure of what the Master's work is. And this we achieve through cultivating our receptivity and the acuity acuity of our consciousness. So that was our segue, and I hope I didn't repeat too much of what I said before, but these things bear repeating. This is 23rd of July. So, and we're on page 24 in Dyna 1, Volume 1, Section 1, Part 3, video commentary. Maybe the nice thing about doing video commentaries is you never know what you're going to say next. Maybe greater exactitude of thought is achieved in the written commentaries, but there's something I would say a little more lively and useful in a different way about the video commentaries. So going on with DK, it will be apparent to you, therefore, that the purpose of these groups is to unfold in time, may I say, not immediately, the three major powers of all illumined minds. And that has to be an interesting subject. What are these major powers? First, the power to work in and with all thought substance. The hierarchy of illumined minds, and may I say elsewhere he calls them organized and illumined minds. But anyway, the hierarchy of illumined minds is a group whose telepathic powers enable them, capital T, to be sensitive to the mind currents and to register the thoughts of those, capital T, who personify the mind of God, the universal mind. May I say, in a sense, on the cosmic mental plane, as the level the Buddha touched. So repeating then, to register the thoughts of those who personify the mind of God, the universal mind, and to register the thought forms of those, capital T, who, capital W, are as far beyond the hierarchy of masters as they, in their turn, are beyond the disciples of the world. Now, I suppose the disciples are at least two initiations, well, three maybe, behind the masters of the wisdom. And there are those beings who are 2, 3, 4 initiations ahead of the spiritual hierarchy and even of the, well, shall we call the Chohans members of the hierarchy? They are, in a sense. Anyway, high beings who originate the thought forms which the masters have to pick up and utilize and transmit in a useful form to their disciples. To register the thought forms of those, see how analogy comes in, to register the thought forms of those who are as far behind the hierarchy of masters as they, in their turn, are beyond the disciples of the world. I suppose technically, well, we're all disciples in a way, and all aspirants in a way, but technically, the term initiate is applied to one who has achieved the third degree. So true disciples are those who have taken the first and second initiation, and somewhere between the first and second initiation lies the possibility that the accepting disciple, the pledged disciple, will become the accepted disciple. What a great interior ladder of evolution is presented to us. And we have to move beyond thinking of this ladder with words alone. We really need the experience. Or sometimes I call it an in-perience, because it has to do with the inner worlds and not the X part, which is separating from, isolating from. So going on with the Tibetan, those lives who carry out the ideas of the divine mind exist in their graded orders, capital T, their graded orders, and with the detail of their groupings, we are not concerned. May I add, in one of the rules, is it rule 6, in raise and initiations, anyway, one of those rules, they're called the lights who carry out the will of God. And they move within Shambhala. In the quiet, my friends, we can begin to be sensitive enough to begin to register the reality of these higher points of tension. So anyway, the origins of the ideas of the divine mind also have their graded orders, their, what should we call them, creative hierarchies, and with the detail of their, capital T, their groupings, we are not concerned, except with the fact that the planetary brotherhood is in telepathic rapport with those who are responsible for planetary conditions in the solar system. And may I suggest, these are Shambhalic beings. And he goes on to say, confirming with the Great Council, therefore at Shambhala. So it is the members of the Great Council who are as far beyond the hierarchy in their achievement and are responsible to the solar logos, which our masters are not yet, as the masters, up to what degree, I cannot say, but at least, of course, the fifth, and if we count the Chohans, the sixth and seventh. I think at the eighth initiation, you begin to be named as a Buddha of some kind or other. So it is these Shambhalic lives who are as far beyond the hierarchy, depending on how we consider its membership, as that hierarchy is beyond those who are technically called disciples. Now, of course, if you look forward to your next initiation from a very high point of tension, you are still a disciple. You are a disciple. And in a way, you are an aspirant also. Aspiration, may I say, is not something that just dies as we leave the province of the astral body. Even the solar logos aspires. It's a way of rejoining the unity from which, through emanation, one has seemed to be separated. Aspiration is a fire leading to reunification. And through the mind held steady in the light, we are able to direct that process. And these lives, these great lives in the Great Council, and therefore at Shambhala, says the Tibetan, they are also in immediate telepathic rapport with each other. Now, I'm not sure, let me suggest that we really know what that means. Immediate telepathic rapport with each other. It really emphasizes the seamless unity of their gathering together. There are such things as crowds, but isolation still exists. And there's a statement, let isolation rule, and yet the crowd exists. Something like that. Maybe checking on it from esoteric astrology, page 332. The blind unit is lost. That would be one of the mantrams, the more personality-centered mantram of Cancer. So it's not found on 332. It's going to be found somewhere else. And yet, the crowd. Yeah. So I was a little off, but not too far. Let isolation be the rule, and yet the crowd exists. So you can get many together, and there's still a crowd. They're not really unified. They are alone in their own version of mass consciousness that's different from being really unified. Okay, now we're going back to DK's writings here. And of course, may I say that in a crowd of isolated consciousnesses, you just don't have telepathic rapport. You may have some solar plexus rapport of those to whom, with those to whom the original unit is related. There are various kinds of telepathy. Maybe every level speaks its own type of telepathy, but you don't have the true telepathic rapport that arises from unity. And of course, the more we work together with love, what does he say? Simply this: love one another. Have the attitude of love towards one another. That will facilitate the real telepathy born of unity. So, if nothing else, my friends, let us have the will to love, and let it be transformed into the mind as it is in Christ, which is the true love. Let us love one another. Sometimes we're blocked, by the personality reactions and things that we find offensive and unappealing, and all of those preoccupying judgments. But eventually, we melt all that, we dissolve all that, and we begin to approximate the mind as it is in Christ. Just a personal note, as an old Jew, which is what I am in one way, I find it so strange to be speaking in this manner. But this I owe to the Tibetan and his very logical, reasonable presentations, so that even somebody like myself, focused entirely mentally and academically, could be persuaded as to the rightness of this new, well, not new anymore, but new attitude. And then it takes me back, strangely, to all of the experiences I've had with the church over many centuries. It opened up that door. So I could see, it's interesting, one's conditioning. I guess I'm adding something here a little bit, but when you're raised in the Jewish faith, or at least the Jewish social milieu, as I can never say my family had the faith, they were more the modern, so-called Reformed Jews, showing up at the temple for high holidays, which was as much a social event as anything else, not an event for believers. coming from one who could barely pronounce the name Jesus in the great music of the Renaissance and classical era and so forth, which I was privileged to sing, coming from that position where I would get a catch in my throat and I deliberately left the word out, to the position I'm now in, shows how long it took to overcome my present incarnational conditioning. And maybe for some of you, similar things have happened. We have many overlays in our past, many traditions of which we have been a part, or in which we have taken part. And just because an overlay seems to be what it is at the moment, doesn't mean it is necessarily abidingly true. I've had, I think, much greater experience in the church over the years than I have in the Jewish tradition. Although many of us, if we think we've come from the previous solar system, and of course a determination has to be made there, will be identified as the nomads. It's a word very similar to monad, but a little reversal there. And to the so-called wandering Jew, wandering from the first major solar system to the second. Maybe yes, maybe no. These things have to be eventually established intuitively. So that's a little sidetrack there, but maybe instructive. I do believe, am I right, am I wrong, that a little bit of self-disclosure as to what one's own experience has been can be illuminative for others. I don't look at it as an indulgence. I say, this is what I have experienced. If it does you some good, great. And if not, I don't think so much harm is done. But of course, ringing in my ears is the statement, forget the good self and the bad self, and let only Christ be seen and heard. Takes me way, way back. Way back. And we will all be remembering our incarnations. Sometimes it may be a place, it may be nature, it may be a conversation, it may be music, it may be many things, but a little link of light is created to that which has happened before, and maybe will prove illuminating and helpful in the present life. So please forgive me my sidetrack here. These video commentaries, especially now, have the element of spontaneity about them, and I say what comes to mind. Anyway, even in the shambolic points of tension and in the Great Council, the lives are graded, and also in immediate telepathic rapport. with each other, as we hope to achieve in our lesser groups, something of that telepathic rapport. The Tibetan goes on, thank goodness, okay. The Tibetan goes on, the slowly manifesting powers of the radio, may I suggest, as if something still more is coming, and it has come. The slowly manifesting powers of the radio and the sensitive workings of the perfecting radio mechanisms and of television, and may I suggest the extension, the logical extension, the internet and computer interaction. He says the sensitive workings of the perfecting radio mechanisms and of television going on are but the response in physical matter of the perfected telepathic powers and television of the minds of the masters of the wisdom. And forget not, he's always balancing us, isn't he? Forget not that such powers are inherent in all men. And may I say, the great danger has been the idea that only Christ forever will be able to do X, Y, and Z, because he is unique. He is the only Son of God. He is the only one who is divine in a special way in relationship to God, whom we know as the planetary logos, and the extension of that logos as Sanat Kumara. Well, may I say, that kind of attitude is misleading, and Master Moria deals with it as he praises Thomas à Kempis, a monk of the 13th century or 12th, or somewhere in there, praises Thomas à Kempis for his book, The Imitation of Christ, rather than the worship of Christ. These great beings have little use for our worship of them. And somewhere particularly, he seems to say that the lords of liberation find any kind of worship directed towards them as distasteful, abhorrent, inappropriate, not useful. They want to be invoked by the proper kind of attitude that we have, and not worshipped. I mean, worship is an aspect of awe and of fear. Of course, it's quite natural, but after a while, we should be aware that we can say to ourselves and to the ones we heretofore worshipped, let me be like you. Let me achieve as you have. Let me summon your intervention, and not, oh, how great you are, how great you are, how great you are. Yes, they are great, but what good does it do to say so interminably? So in the Aquarian age, we transform worship into invocation. It's a much better, much more useful process. DK goes on. The inner group of masters with whom I am associated. Notice please, he doesn't say I am a master. Okay. He leaves it a little vague. Now we know that he is Master Chualpu. The inner group of masters with whom, capital W, I am associated, work telepathically also with their disciples, and the disciples with each other in lesser degree. So this telepathic work, what are we looking at here? It's three major powers of illumined minds. Sometimes I forget the beginning of an outline. Have to go back a bit. Anyway, the mode of working with us, as with themselves, is a type of telepathy. Pathos, the body. We could take that word apart, you know. Anyway, DK goes on, the power to see the master, which has been the misguided impulse of the devotees of the world, who substitute this desire for aspiration towards soul contact, is but their response to the, quote, television of those who seek to guide them into the light of their own souls. I think television was emerging even a little bit commercially in the 1930s. I don't think normal families had the television until the 1940s or 50s. But anyway, seeing the master is a response to the sense of the television of those, capital T, who, capital W, seek to guide them into the light of their own souls. And may I add, when the Buddha says, rely upon yourselves, he's talking about the ability to be guided by your own soul, or a still higher aspect of yourself. He's not just talking about the ready personality. So these who aspire to see, the Tibetan says, they are only reacting to one of the demonstrated divine powers of the master, and not to soul action. Well, it seems important to react to the latter rather than the former. So many possibilities lie ahead, but we need the proper training. And that is precisely what Master DK is offering to many who ultimately will not even, quote unquote, belong to him abidingly in his ashram. But still, the training has to be offered, and he was willing to undertake it. Going on with DK, your response to such stimulation as I can give you, and an earnest endeavor on your part to love with unselfishness. Will gradually perfect in you a similar relation to other workers. And may I add that what that may mean is that we will become masters. And then it's going to work out in three directions. Now, remember, we're still talking about telepathic rapport as one of the qualities of the illumined mind. So this will work out in three directions. In a demonstrated ability to be in telepathic rapport with me, that is the Tibetan, and with those, capital T, with whom I am associated. Okay. Number two, in a power to communicate with each other at any time. If we have a unified group, and it's unified because of thinking outwardly towards each other in terms of love, then communication will be instantaneous. Note how much Gemini is in that idea of both love and communication. And number three, in sensitivity to the thoughts of humanity as a whole. And surely the masters have to have that, don't they? Because they're always gauging how much they can give. And if they give too much, well, Master Moria says, to give too much, or everything, is to put on chains. And it's a danger, a little knowledge being a dangerous thing, and in a way, all knowledge being a little knowledge. So the knowledge imparted can be a dangerous thing to the progression of the plan if wrongly used. So DK knows he is stimulating them, but that stimulation or attempted stimulation has to be met with love, unselfish love, unselfish love. And you can ponder the degree to which you are capable of unselfish love. So anyway, going on. Can you not see, therefore, he says, how a miniature replica of the Brotherhood can be established on earth, and how in decades to come, we're on page 25 now, how in decades to come, the working disciples of the world, the isolated initiates in many world organizations, May I add that they're isolated because they don't have too many fellow initiates in those organizations to talk to, really, on the level that they could talk. So repeating, the isolated initiates in the many world organizations and the personnel, interesting that word personnel, it still indicates the presence and importance of the personality instrument. And the personnel of the new group of world servers will automatically respond to the telepathic sensitivity of such groups as will be found working in the many ashrams of the masters. Now, this miniature replica kind of deals with that in another way. In the beginning of Rule 11, from discipleship, rather from the rays and the initiations, to produce a brotherhood in miniature. May I add that might have been hoped, so I've gathered, that the Theosophical Society would have become such, but it didn't, apparently, and fell into the trap of academic occultism and ambition for initiation. Ambition for initiation, self-serving attitudes that the individual hopes will lead to initiation will not lead to initiation. Rather, the door becomes too narrow, as the old catechism tells us. So I'm going to repeat this from the Tibetan. Can you not see, therefore, how a miniature replica of the Brotherhood can be established on earth, and how in decades to come, the working disciples of the world, the isolated initiates in the many world organizations, and the personnel of the new group of world servers will automatically respond to the telepathic sensitivity of such groups as will be found working in the many ashrams of the masters. Well, can we see? 3 levels are given: initiate, disciple, personnel. Those who are more influenced by the personality. DK goes on. The result of this success will not be the recognition of any particular group, but it will lead to the recognition of a universal power and the state of mind of disciples of all degrees. So Master DK, and probably he will do more of this in his set of bridging treatises towards the knowledge of the new age, is prognosticating. The Aquarian age is to be regarded, in one respect, as the age of universality. So when he tells us that success to this telepathic response will lead to the recognition of a universal power and a state of mind of disciples of all degrees, he is definitely foreseeing a strong possibility and hierarchical intention for the new age. DK goes on. This will establish in time and without controversy the unity of all beings. Something, may I add, that we are even now struggling to achieve. The revelation of unity, he says, through the power of thought is the glorious consummation of the work of the Brotherhood. And to this you do, as do all disciples, respond in your highest moments. And let us remember that Master DK says, I know you as you are in your highest moments, or at least that's the kind of self he looks for. He, of course, is not unaware of that into which we can sink through extension rather than right tension. I mean, if he's giving people advice as to their diet and their exercise, he gets right down in the trenches with them. But he's telling us that the Master, to really know us, looks to us as we are in our highest moments. And of course, what we have here is a confirmation of the variability of moments, the variability of the content of consciousness in various moments, as it is with physicality. And I'm certainly learning that lesson. There are good days and bad days. And I suppose as it is with regard to consciousness, there are illumined days and unillumined days. I'm beginning to see the wisdom of the AA program's dictum, one day at a time. One day at a time. This is so Venusian, the revelation of unity through the power of thoughts. It's not just a felt sense of unity, it's the mind also is seeing and appreciating the unity, which does not mean that the felt sense of it disappears. I sometimes think that if many of us could leave this incarnation with the conviction of a great underlying unity, we would really have achieved something. So when we talk about glorious consummation, we do mean the transfiguration, which is the first true higher initiation. DK goes on, it can in a smaller way and according to the measure of your consecration, that is, may I say, how much you are attempting to make all aspects of that which flows from you sacred. According to the measure of your consecration, be your glory. And your goal also, if you hold the thought of oneness, of service, and above all else of love. Gosh, I'm kind of slipping. I'm getting interested in going back to my colors. But it does take extra time. But when my back is in the position that I can lean forward, I don't mind it so much. And so, friends, think, what is the measure of our consecration? The measure of our determination to see and understand all things as sacred and to dedicate our life to this perception of sacredness and the possibility of greater service which arises from the illumined perception of sacredness. May I suggest we have no doubt as to the measure of consecration of the Master. We understand 30 years' work to deliver to us as the messenger of hierarchy, or at least a major messenger of hierarchy. Such detailed and organized teaching is certainly evidence of the kind of consecration which hopefully we will increasingly achieve. Well, the first was all about the power of telepathy and how the group becomes telepathic and how the master works telepathically. Masters work telepathically with each other and with the members of their ashram, and also with the peripheral groups which they are attempting to inspire. About that word inspiration, the hierarchy works through inspiration. But what else about the powers of the mind? Isn't that what it is that we're looking at? I keep on forgetting. 3 major powers of all illumined minds. So, first one is the power to work in and through all thought substance. Takes a while, doesn't it, to become a thinker? The soul is called the thinker. How many millions of years does it take for us newly individualized into the fourth kingdom to become a thinker? We can be a doer and a feeler over the first two root races, but when we enter from the point of view of consciousness, the Aryan root race, we are required to be a thinker. Okay, well, the second power of all illumined minds is the power of the intuition. Which is the goal of much of the work which disciples must do. And it requires the unfoldment of another faculty in man. So it's not enough to be a good concrete thinker. It helps, of course. Logical, rational, able to dispel many errors through the normal light of the Ajna center, in which the new group of world servers participate. That is the Ajna center of Sanat Kumara. But what about that quality of intuition coming from the Buddhic plane and somewhat reflected in the soul body? Now again, go to the beginning of Glamour, a World Problem. And for the first few pages, you get absolutely foundational definitions of intuition, light, wisdom, understanding, between all of which there is a significant distinction. Does it mean, I ask, that we have to have our nose in the books? Well, in a way, yes. There comes a time in the arcane school when a demand is put forward, study for at least 1 hour a day. It would seem a small request and a wise request. At least that. I told you that, of course, I'm a bit of a fanatic, but to make my studies into opportunities for dizziness, 10 hours of study a day, maybe more at times. A bit crazy, but it depends on the degree of your thirst for knowledge and wisdom into which knowledge can be transmuted. So, the power of the illumined mind, one of them is the power of the intuition, which is the goal of much of the work which disciples must do. And that power requires the unfoldment of another faculty in man. We all have these not yet unfolded faculties. Well, if we ambitiously just want to unfold the faculties so that we can say, okay, I've unfolded these faculties, and then we begin to use them for selfish or semi-selfish purposes, we defeat our own purpose. Rather, it's the group unity, as we have been repeatedly told, the harmony, the service, the love, which are the main points. DK goes on, the intuition is a function of the mind also, and may I add, it is called by the name transcendental mind. In a way, it's very Mercurian, we might say, but not alone. Uranus and Neptune both contribute to the emergence of the intuition. So, repeating, DK, the intuition is a function of the mind also, and when rightly used, it enables man to grasp reality with clarity and to see that reality free from glamour and the illusions of the three worlds. Well, that's a promise, and an important one. Transcendental mind, vision of a deglamored and, if I can use the word, disillusioned kind. May I say that to understand how humanity normally regards illusion, we consider the following sentence as an indication of an unfortunate realization. I felt so disillusioned, as if we're pining for the old illusions rather than rejoicing in the fact that one more illusion has met its demise in our consciousness. Sometimes I think that when you have horoscopically Saturn and Pluto, or either one, in the ninth house of the chart, it's good for disillusionment, for breaking things down and seeing things in a without illusion, no longer slave to the old world view. I guess we realize how slow a process all of this could be were it not for the expert advice we are receiving from a teacher like Master DK. Going on with DK, when the intuition functions in any human being, he is enabled to take direct and correct action, for he is in touch with the plan. Now, may I add, then intuition reveals the plan and the action to take. Concrete mind alone won't do it. So repeating the benefits of what Master Moria calls straight knowledge, he is enabled to take direct and correct action, for he is in touch with the plan, with pure and unadulterated, may we add uncontaminated, with pure and unadulterated fact and undistorted ideas, free from illusion and coming direct from the divine or universal mind. Now, are those words to us? Do we have some kind of idea what is meant? So much of our action is indirect, incorrect, out of touch with the reality of the plan, adulterated or contaminated, and distorted. Who wants to operate in that way? I can't think that we would. My friends, it's a whole other world that abides beneath the threshold of our normal consciousness. So we've been told, haven't we, how we are to operate when the intuition functions. Going on with decay, the unfoldment of this faculty will bring about a world recognition of the plan, not just, may I add, a little personal, individual recognition, that too, but not only repeating the unfoldment of this faculty, which is a very Buddhic faculty, may I add, and has connection to the Buddhic plane, straight knowledge, pure reason. World disciples have to have world recognition, don't they? So repeating the unfoldment of this faculty will bring about a world recognition of the plan. And this is the greatest achievement of the present world cycle. Well, obviously, the intuition is extendable, and there are those higher faculties in a logos or planetary logos, the solar logos, and beyond, which are akin on their level to intuition, maybe coming from the cosmic Buddhic plane. And it really just keeps going. So we have to ask ourselves, how aware are we of the nature of the plan in a world sense? And of course, the great invocation embodies encapsulation the essence of the plan: light, love, power, and human activity to bring the light, love, and power into manifestation. Maybe it's there that we fail a bit. I know when I think of myself, I'd rather have a better manifestational capacity than I do. I often look to my wife, Tuya, and with her 1st and 7th grade, she's got it. And I'm trying to learn it. I can think, but to make those thoughts into plan-aligned realities on the etheric physical plane, the systemic, etheric, physical plane. This is another matter. DK goes on, when that plan is sensed, there comes the realization of the unity of all beings, of the synthesis of world evolution. May I add all aspects of the evolving units contributing to the well-being of each other. Quite a term, well-being. So of the synthesis of world evolution and of the unity of the divine objective. Well, wouldn't I like to have that? Such a realization. When that plan is sensed, DK says, and we can't sense it the way the three great lords in hierarchy can sense it, but on our own little level, when that plan is sensed, there comes the realization. It's an Atmic quality, isn't it? There comes the realization of the unity of all beings. May I add, the sameness of all beings is still another step. But okay, DK calls what must eventuate in consciousness as a realization of the unity of all beings, of the synthesis of world evolution. May I add that we're not just all like sheep who have gone astray, everyone to his own way. It's a great choral piece in Handel's Messiah. No, we're not ultimately like that. There's a synthesis in world evolution. So we all are meant to contribute to the evolution of every other embodied form. And of the unity of the divine objective. What shall we call it? So the destined divine coherence, the law of coherence is a second systemic law. At least that factor is involved. Law of vibration, law of coherence, law of death and disintegration. Anyway, the 7 systemic laws. DK goes on. All life and all forms are seen then in their true perspective. May I add, unglamored, unaffected by frozen misinterpretations, which we call illusions. They're seen as they are. Repeating, all life and all forms are seen then in their true perspective, a right sense of values and of time, then eventuates. Well, when we see what is important, we begin to value that which is important instead of that which is secondary and rather irrelevant. This is the old story of attending to the essential and not the non-essential. I'm, a little person personal history. I worked at the arcane school, and my mind could go in all different directions. So I once located some obscure fact about the sin of the mindless and the relationship between the anthropoid apes and those who had become truly human and evolving as human beings. And I kind of mindlessly, thoughtlessly submitted it to Mary Bailey at the time, and was advised in an effective manner that I should keep my mind on the essential. So things like that crop up as you review your life, your life experience, lessons learned. I also, it's humorous, I remember reaching the age of 40 while working at the arcane school, and I, maybe in a self-congratulatory manner, said that I felt a certain maturity coming upon myself. Well, that was like setting up the punchline for a devastating retort. And Mary said, "That's funny. I see no signs of it." Well, maybe she was right. But I'm sure our lives are filled with memorable moments, both good and bad, that are significant to our progress. They are markers along the way. So then, anyway, repeating the Tibetan, all life and all forms are seen then in their true perspective and a right sense of values and of time, then eventuates. And may I add that we're talking now about Venus and Saturn, two rulers of the sign of initiation, namely Capricorn. They're also found significantly in Libra along with Uranus. So, friends, have you checked out your sense of values? And have you noticed any flaws in your sense of values? Well, I'm sure if we're honest, we will find a few delinquencies. So DK goes on, when the plan is truly intuited, may I add, not just reasoned about, but is truly intuited at first hand. And let me add that it can come down as great thoughts, but we don't have the experience of first-hand contact with the plan as it is. It's okay, it's good, but it's not yet the real thing. So repeating then, when the plan is truly intuited and at first hand, then constructive effort becomes inevitable, and there is no lost motion. Now, why does he say that? Because if we're misguided by glamour and delusion, or even when we hear thus X, Y, or Z has said the plan is, there is the possibility of error in our action, but not when we see the plan directly. DK goes on, it is the partial realization of the plan and its interpretation at second or third hand by the ignorant, which is responsible for the wasted effort and the foolish impulses which characterize the present occult and world organizations. Well, kind of realistic, right? Rather realistic. And making us want to really develop what Master Moria calls straight knowledge. The various groups, DK says, in a master's ashram can fulfill certain functions and provide laboratories for specified work. Maybe, may I add or say that that was what might have been one of the functions of the groups that DK was gathering around himself, and which were serving a kind of seed group development laboratory or opportunity for the investigation. We've got some scientific language here, don't we? So the various groups in a master's ashram, there were 10 or meant to be 10, never really got that far. It will get that far, I think. Can fulfill certain functions and provide laboratories for specified work. May I add that at Meditation Mount, when they were having their conferences in the older days, they called them the specialized groups, and people would divide up from the conference and go into those different rooms where the work of the specialized groups was being discussed. I began that in 1982 or 1983, so almost 40 years ago, and found, they were doing a good job in my estimation. Going on with DK, some can provide a demonstration laboratory of the trained observers of the world and can handle world, glamour, and illusion. Now that would be, would it not, seed group number 2. Other groups can focus on the development of the telepathic faculty and become trained communicators from above to below, and that would be, would it not, group number 1. The telepathic communicators, in which Alice Bailey was a member, and I think Foster Bailey, and I think Regina Keller, and a number of the more advanced and original disciples who had helped Alice Bailey establish the Arcane School and sustain it. So, trained observers, that's one type of laboratory, and trained telepathic communicators, that's still another. The objective before the hierarchy at this time is to break and dissipate the world glamour. Well, there's a very direct statement. Maybe we're not yet at the point when enough people are mentally focused where world illusion, in the technical sense, is as much a problem as world glamour, to which so many seem to be subject. I mean, if there were not such intense glamour that came over Germany, we would not have had the externalization of these wars we call the Great War. So glamour is definitely the more major world problem at this time than is world illusion, to be dealt with later. But among disciples, of course, world illusion, technically considered, has to be dealt with. So break up and dissipate. Break up and dissipate the world glamour. Help with its disintegration and its, well, let's just use the word dissipation. This has to happen on a world scale, just as it happens in the life of every disciple, and that is eventually. Just as a man shifts his focus of consciousness, says the Tibetan, shifts his focus of consciousness when on the path of discipleship onto the mental plane and learns to smash, what a word, to smash the glamour which has hitherto held him on the astral plane. So the problem before the hierarchy today is to bring about a similar happening in the life of humanity as a whole. May I add that when you smash something, it does fall apart, doesn't it? So first the breaking through smashing, and then the dissipation. Repeating then, so the problem before the hierarchy today is to bring about a similar happening in the life of humanity as a whole. And going on, for humanity is at the crossroads, and its consciousness is being rapidly focused on the mental plane. And may I add, this was written before the Second World War precipitated. So it shows that even then, there was the attempt to banish the glamour, which eventually proved responsible for the outward precipitation of the Second World War. And then strong words, a death blow must be struck at the world illusion. And there maybe he's using illusion in a more general sense. You know, in the Glamour book, he does use particularity and generality. Illusion, glamour, and Maya, well, they are particulars, but they also count for each other. They are, in some ways, interchangeable titles or rubrics or names for an undesirable, misleading condition in which the participants do not really know they are participants. So humanity, says the Tibetan, is at the crossroads where, may I add, decisions must be made, and its consciousness is being rapidly focused on the mental plane. Notice he did not say polarized. Polarized is another step, polarization, achieved between the second and third initiation, where the majority of humanity does not yet find itself. A death blow must be struck at the world illusion, for it holds the sons of men in thrall. Notice that when you say to somebody who's very attractive, you look enthralling, you're admitting you're a captive. We've used it as a term reeking with glamour, but we don't know it. We think it means wonderfully, irresistibly attractive. But in that irresistibility comes the problem. It's a bit like the sirens are singing now, and you'll be, if you listen too strongly to the song, you're going to be shipwrecked. Ulysses Odysseus, was wise in plugging the ears of his shipmates, but having himself bound to the mast with his ears unplugged, so he could hear the sirens sing, and yet was physically incapable of madly directing the ship towards them, because no one could hear his orders. So there are some forces just more powerful than our apparent will, so it seems. In the Lord of the Rings, no matter how good a person was, once they put on that ring of power, their personality changed immediately, and they became mad with the desire for power. So we have to assess what we can handle and what is still too strong for us. I'm remembering some psychological types who basically came to the phrase in the Great Invocation, which asked us to seal the door where evil dwells. And they said, well, this is no good. Every psychologist knows you can't seal evil away because it's going to come back and bite you, because you have to, in fact, deal with it. But what these contemporary psychologists didn't know is how powerful, how overpowering how beyond the scope of being dealt with was the evil that had to be sealed away. They didn't know the power of their enemy, and so they applied simply a conventional, rather superficial solution. Oh, open it up and just deal with it well and be devoured by it. So a judgment is required concerning that, and let us know what is within our power to handle and what is not. So going on with the Tibetan, after this death blow, by learning, realizing that I caught the wrong color. By learning to break through the glamour in their own lives and to live in the light of the intuition, the disciples can strengthen the hands. May I add a very common phrase, strengthen the hands of those, capital T, whose, capital W, task it is to awaken the intuition in man. Now, DK actually even asks us to be careful about applying intuition, or at least the powers of the soul, to the astral plane, because he says we need the technique of light there. When we apply soul powers, which are akin to the intuition needed to dispel illusion, we may make the glamour worse. Somewhere in the book, Glamour, a World Problem, I think that's the book, he deals with that. But certainly, if we have the opportunity to strengthen the hands of members of the hierarchy, humble though we are and lowly though we are, we want to take that opportunity. Going on with the Tibetan, there are many and different kinds of glamour, and disciples are frequently surprised when they learn what is regarded as glamour by the masters. I will enumerate a few of the more general glamours for you, leaving you to make any needed application and expansion of the idea from the individual to humanity as a whole. Now, may I say that in the book Glamour, a World Problem, there are many glamours listed, one under each, or at least a group of them, under each ray. Here the list is smaller, but you probably will be able to detect the ray association. So these lists of glamours, they certainly do have individual application, but they have national, international, and pan-human applications as well. And indeed, glamours are hard to detect. Our own glamours are hard to detect. Maybe if we can look at what we think other people are, we'll find ourselves having invested them with a glamour which, in some strong measure, belongs to us. So there's a lot of psychological work to do. And obviously, it's more than the project of a single incarnation. How many incarnations will we have in the Aquarian age? Well, I don't think there's a way to standardize that, as some of the earlier theosophists tried to do, and which practice DK revoked and said, you really can't do that. Much depends on the status of the individual and spiritual status, and whether they'll be spending time in the devachanic world of the lower mental plane, not the higher, or whether they'll be coming right back as soon as is reasonably possible to pick up the threads where they left off and to help with the ongoing externalization of the hierarchy, which I think, well, it may begin like the drops which presage a monsoon. It's not the whole monsoon. They may begin that way shortly, even in 2025. But the full flood of externalization, the streaming in of Master Moria, Master KH, a certain English master, Master Rakutsi, and the Tibetan, or their representatives, is not something that is going to be completed immediately. The sense of our participation in the processes that lie ahead have to be for us very vivid. Life is one, the wheel turns, and there is no death, the Tibetan tells us, and we are preparing to go through another cycle in the wheel, in the wheel's turning. Now we are still attached to the wheel of rebirth, and maybe our first chance to become really detached from it occurs at the fourth initiation, when the causal body is destroyed. There is no need individually, personally, for repeated human incarnations, though there may well be, for service purposes, those incarnations. So I think we're not going to go further, because it looks like a good place to kind of stop here, because we're going to be dealing with maybe 9, maybe 10, I didn't see, glamours as listed in this book, as well as the many more later listed in Glamour World Problem. And I am dealing with that when I have the glamour programs and reading through the book. So here we have the end of program 13. And we've gone, well, because I'm elaborating on things, we're not exactly burning up the pages. But if we can go somewhat in depth, then that is, for me, a desirable objective. And I know I throw in a lot of little anecdotes, which I hope you can live through. Anyway, this was the end of program 13. Took us almost to page 27. And when possible, I'll pick this up again because, tonight is the pre-full moon night, and we're getting close in the middle of the night to the actual Leo-Sirius full moon. So we have to do what is required. And we'll get into the names of these glamours. Interestingly associated with the rays, the glamour of destiny, I guess ray 1, glamour of aspiration, ray 6, glamour of self-assurance, or what might be called the astral principles of the disciple. It's kind of a ray 6 thing. The glamour of duty, again, ray 6, ray 7. The glamour of environing conditions. One of the advanced disciples kind of had this, and he had a double ray 5 as well as a first ray soul. The glamour of the mind and its efficiency. It's a ray 3 glamour, I think. Glamour of devotion, ray 6. Glamour of desire, ray 6 mostly, and with some ray 4 here. And the glamour of personal ambition, well, largely a ray 1 glamour. We'll see what he says about these. Any one of these areas could provide a significant and ongoing study. So in a way, I feel like I'm just scratching the surface. What else can we do when we see what DK has given, except scratch the surface? We may call these programs Cosmic Fire in Depth or Discipleship in the New Age in Depth, but it's just relative depth for us and not the kind of authentic depth that we would present if we were solidly, internally, interiorly members of his ashram or of any ashram. Remember, it's not a place. An ashram is not a place. It's the state of mind of a spiritual group. So I'll go on with this next time, program 14, and I judge that there are going to be quite a few programs with this first section, largely because I have changed my method of elaboration. In other words, I'm saying more than I can possibly write down. And it will be written for those who are receiving them on the side in the audio transcript. And there will be mistakes because that audio transcriber doesn't necessarily hear what I'm saying. They hear the closest thing to what I'm saying, but there are errors. And then in general, BL and Harold are providing a different kind of program simply with the image and the text for Makara and for YouTube. So friends, you will have plenty to study. And if you're a regular meditator, obviously, plenty to meditate upon. And if you're a member of the Moria Federation, which is the internet arm of the University of the Seven Rays, you will have your meditations regularized. They will be organized in the years that you study. And as far as service goes, the diversity of service is much up to you. But at the same time, that service is arising out of unity of perspective. I mean, about the essential fundamental things, the members of an ashram are ideally and mostly not disagreeing. So let us rejoice in what has been given. It is a joy to do the Master's work. It is a joy to read the Master's thoughts. It is a labor to apply in service what the Master has suggested. And let's try to keep a balance between meditation, study, and service. When a machine is in balance, it lasts a lot longer than if one part of it is shaking everything else apart. So let us break up and dissipate the glamours we notice, and you can do that by, well, you can do it on your own or with your local groups, but you can also do it with the Moria Federation every couple of weeks, I think, when we do the glamour meditation, which DK has given us. And the beam of light to dissipate the wrong use of emotional energy. Okay, friends, so number 14 next. Not sure it can be today because there just is so much. The sacred pentagram work that Tui will offer, and then the pre-full moon that I will offer, and then middle of the night for us, the Sirius Leo full moon, a very important one, in which the entirety of hierarchy, including the newly inducted members, is recognized by Sanat Kumara. So love and many blessings from Tuya and myself, and from the members of the communications team, the ongoing team of BL and Joe and Michael Stacy and Michael Crow. Hope I'm not leaving anybody out. We have other helpers on an intermittent basis. All those who are helping bring you the ageless wisdom, the light of the ageless wisdom in its unifying power. We'll see you soon. Bye-bye for now.